boys and girls, welcome to another story time. I am so pleased that you could join us this morning. Did you have a good night's sleep last night? Did you sleep in a warm bed? Perhaps with a duvet? Nowadays, duvets and duvet covers are very popular. And I know that many children like to have duvet covers that feature their favorite Disney character, or perhaps their favorite jungle or space theme. But back in the olden days, people did not have duvets or duvet covers, and they kept themselves warm by using something called a patchwork quilt. I wonder if any of you have a patchwork quilt on your bed at home. Well, the patchwork quilt was an interesting design because it was actually made from all the bits of cloth, clothing, rags that were thrown out and that people really had no use for anymore. Here, for example, is an old tea towel. It's not going to be used anymore in the kitchen. Oh, my fingers are poking through. But if someone were going to make a patchwork quilt with this, they would look for a nice clean part that doesn't have any holes or tears in it. And look at this. This even has a pattern of two kitties in a basket. Perhaps I could cut this piece out and put it away to use later. Or I might take another piece of it, this corner perhaps, that has an interesting line going through it here. Maybe I'd cut out a few pieces of this and keep that on hand to put into a bigger project. This is a rag from a t-shirt, but it has no holes in it, so perhaps this could be useful for part of my patchwork quilt later on. I'd put that into my box as well. What else do I have down here? Oh, an old pair of jeans that are way too small. I don't want to throw this into the rubbish bin. Maybe I'll cut a few squares out of this and put this into my box for later that I can use in my patchwork quilt. You're getting the idea, boys and girls, that I can use any bits and pieces that I find. Instead of throwing them away, I'm going to use them and save them up until I have enough to sew together to make one large blanket, my patchwork quilt. And that is what people did back in the day. Now, there was something else that you needed to know. In addition to having all your bits and pieces, you also needed to know your shapes. And I'm hoping, boys and girls, that you are good at your shapes as well. Let's see what you can remember from school. And here I have what shape is this? If you said square, you would be correct. And so, if I were making a patchwork quilt, I would need to know that this would be my starting block, a square. And I will now be able to arrange all of my pieces around this idea of a frame. But did you know that a square can do so many things? Let me show you. What shape is this? It used to be a square, but what is it now? Okay, if you said rectangle, you would be correct. What about this? If I take my square and turn it this way, what do I have now? It's a diagonal. It's a diamond shape. Okay, that is a diamond shape. So if I take my diamond shape, and if I fold it in half, what do I have now? Yeah, I have a triangle, and I can take my triangle and I can make it smaller, and I can make it smaller still. Remember, we started with the idea of the block, and that block has the capability of accommodating all different shapes. I can take my block and I can make a smaller block, which is still a square, just smaller. And I can take that small square and I can make it smaller still. And here I have got 16 little blocks, little squares. So with my rags and with my knowledge of shapes, now I'm ready to take my pieces and to trim them so that they can fit the pattern that I want to make for my patchwork quilt. Well, boys and girls, we're in for a little treat, because I realized recently that my friend Joanne Ligamari has several patchwork quilts, and I didn't even know that I was sleeping on a couple of them. Let me show you. The first one that I noticed was this beautiful yellow banded patchwork quilt, and let me just show you the pattern in the block right there. Do you see that pattern? Isn't that gorgeous? A great big flower shape. Actually, this patchwork quilt shape is called the Dresden plate. And one thing I have to point out, boys and girls, is that patchwork quilting has been so common right across the globe in so many different cultures that there are thousands and thousands of designs now. So many, they could fill encyclopedias. And look at this one, isn't it a beauty? The Dresden plate design. And if you look at each of the petals right here, you can see how very different they are. Spots, checks. That looks like a paisley, sort of interesting shapes in this one. And look, there's some big blotches of yellow and white and little flowers there. We've got stripes with checks and florals. So many pretty designs. And they don't look odd because when they're together in the design, they're just perfect. This is a quilt that was made by Joanne's grandmother, and her name was Amelia Alessino. Amelia Alessino. And this quilt, boys and girls, is over 100 years old. Over 100 years old. The quilts last very well. And one other thing I've learned about quilts is that in each culture, their quilts are so unique and have such histories attached to them. The slaves in the southern states, they made quilts, and they put into their quilts stories and maps and all sorts of family truths and symbolism. People used to make quilts to give to their sons or daughters for when they got married, and those quilts would travel with them far, far away, and they could take the quilts out and they could feel like they were at home again. People gave quilts just for reasons of friendship, and that, boys and girls, I can show you an example of that right now. This is another beautiful quilt, and this quilt is also one that was given to Joanne Ligamari by her grandmother, Amelia Alessino. And look at this. I'm going to hold it back. You can see the shapes, the big squares, alternate pink, and then All of the other ones here, they have their own colours in them, but they have something else as well. And I'm going to try and show you this so that you can actually read it for yourself. Let me see one with dark writing on it. Okay, perhaps this one. Can you see this? You can see there is writing going right through the centre. And as you go through each of these blocks, each one of them has writing going through the centre. This is a friendship patchwork quilt, and all the names are the names of the ladies in the town where this was created. And this was created in a small town called Williamson in the state of Iowa. And it only has like less than 200 families. And this quilt, which is over 100 years old, has 32 names stitched in to the pattern. So beautiful, so meaningful, and such a wonderful slice of history. And very warm at night as well, I might add. This reminds me, boys and girls, of something that I read in the Bible. In Isaiah chapter 64 and verse 6, we read that all of our righteousness, all our good deeds, all the things we try to do to make ourselves acceptable to God, all those things are just like rags. That's what the Bible says. They're all like dirty rags, in fact. So how do we go from being the dirty rag to being something beautiful? Well, in Ephesians 2 verse 10, we read that we are God's workmanship, that he has created us for something bigger and better than we can ever hope to be by ourselves. That Jesus has made us into a beautiful, unique patchwork quilt. That his blood makes us so wonderfully special and fits us right in to the plan that he has for us. And so, boys and girls, I want us to remember when we think about our love for Jesus, when we think about how we want to serve him and do what he has called us to do, that we are part of a bigger picture, that we are part of a patchwork quilt that God himself has put together because he has redeemed us. Okay? So remember that. And before I go, boys and girls, I have one small request. Actually, it's a big challenge. How wonderful would it be to create your own patchwork quilt? Maybe as part of your family, or part of your friendship group, or part of our church. It would be a tremendous legacy and a wonderful keepsake. I think that's a great idea. So calling all those who love to sew and the small embroidery and all those things, that's a great idea. I think that could inspire us. Okay, God bless you, everybody. Take care, and I will talk to you again soon. God bless. Bye-bye now.